Usually, social scientists view societies as created by economic forces. But Bali is different. Civilization began here with Sanskrit poetry about a wondrous and mythical Indian world. Today, those same poems are chanted by Ida Bagus Suryasa, who is learning to become a high priest by studying the ancient manuscripts of Hindu and Buddhist philosophy, which have been preserved in Bali by copying them onto the leaves of the lontar palm. 2,000 years ago, Bali was a tribal society ruled by chiefs. Then wandering priests brought books of Hindu-Buddhist poetry from India, like this epic, the Ramayana. The Balinese used the classical Indian world described in these poems as models for creating a new civilization. They continually modified their own society until the myths of the poetry became real.
Beliau itulah yang menjadi ayahnya pada waktu Batara Wisnu menjadi orang.
Today, priests are not the only people who read the lontar books. Through poetry clubs like this one, the ancient literature reaches into the lives of nearly everyone. Since the poems are in a language no longer spoken, every line is spontaneously translated and its meaning discussed. Anyone can learn to read the lontars, but a high priest must live their philosophy.
Meninggal, sebaiknya dia tidak merasa sedih.
Ya, begitu.
Dia
jadi hidup
gembira,
bebas,
sedih?
Bukan gembira tidak, sedih tidak. Jadi perasaan bebas ya. Perasaan bebas.
Bebas dari apa?
Tidak terikat dari cinta. Itu sulitnya.
Bagaimana sulitnya? Bisa memperjelaskan sedikit?
Begini, misalnya ya, kalau sebagai saya seorang pendeta, kalau bisa ini kan begitu. Saya orang pendeta, jadi punya anak. Terus anak saya sakit sampai meninggal. Itu saya bisa stop, jadi putuskan saya punya cinta pada saya punya anak. Itu dianggap yang baik.
Kenapa?
Karena jadi anak itu tidak terikat kepada kita, kita pun tidak terikat kepada anak.
To become a high priest, Ida Bagus must symbolically perform his own funeral and cut all ties to the ego. Only then can he serve society. 1,000 years ago, the holy men who lived in this monastery, carved like a cave into the hillside, followed the same path. Living apart from society, they studied the lontars and became advisors to Balinese kings. Together, priests and kings ruled Bali until the 20th century. The center of the Middle World was here in the great palace of Klung Klung. Today, the Hall of Justice is all that remains. The Kakord Mayun is the grandson of the last king of Klung Klung. In the days of his grandfather, Bali was peaceful and prosperous. Rice exports were worth 500,000 Dutch guilders a year. By 1906, Bali had become a temptation the Dutch colonial empire could no longer resist. The Kakord's father was then a young prince.
Ini foto siapa?
Ini juga fotonya beliau.
Raja terakhir.
Ya, raja terakhir di Klungkung.
Kegiatan apa pada waktu itu?
Di sini kegiatannya ya
tidak lain tandanya tidak ingin dijajah oleh Belanda, begitu maksudnya. Maka setiap keluarga raja supaya dibunuh, gitu. Saya punya ayah pun begitu. Pertama dia kena di sini, ya, ini tulangnya ini sudah hancur ini.
On September 14th, 1906, 3 battalions of infantry, cavalry, and artillery under the command of General von Tanneken landed on the beaches of South Bali and advanced towards the Palace of Badung. Bali was to become a part of the Dutch colonial empire. As the army marched inland, they found the villages deserted and in flames. Small groups of Balinese armed with swords attacked and were quickly killed. Several days later, the Dutch arrived at the gates of the Palace of Badung. 2 batteries of cannon fired on the Balinese warriors and the royal family, who were armed only with swords and lances. Within an hour, Dutch soldiers were looting the smoking ruins. Every Balinese in the palace was dead. For 2 years, the Balinese fought back. Princes and their courts chose death rather than surrender. Finally, the Dutch attacked Klung Klung, the last and greatest royal court. Though defeat was certain, Klung Klung would not surrender. The king and his entire court, dressed in their most elegant garments, purposefully marched into the gunfire. Those who were not shot stabbed themselves on the spot. Women disdainfully hurled jewels at their assassins, cheating the enemy of any sense of victory. The Balinese called this the Puputan, the finish. Yet the destruction of the great courts was not the end of Balinese civilization. Its real foundation lay in the temples. Thousands of temples survived the battles. Here, the flow of offerings has never ceased. The Dutch ruled Bali until World War II, when the Japanese Navy drove them out. The Balinese fought for independence and in 1947 became a province of the new nation of Indonesia. In 1969, a more subtle invasion began with the building of an international airport. A few thousand tourists arrived the first year. By 1979, they were coming at the rate of 1/3 per year. There are only 2 million Balinese. With the tourists came the technology and the ideas of the West. I Gusti Kaler, Balinese priest.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Kami, umat Hindu di Bali, sebenarnya menerima sesuatu warisan mentalitas dari leluhur, yaitu terbuka terhadap segala pengaruh yang datang dari luar. Tetapi itu tidak kami telan mentah-mentah. Teknologi, alat-alat komunikasi, elektronika, dan lain-lainnya, semua kami terima. Sebagai alat, dia belum bernilai baik atau buruk. Kami gunakan ia untuk berkomunikasi tentang ajaran agama, untuk membimbing tentang kesusilaan dan sebagainya, sehingga radio, TV, alat-alat komunikasi, tape recorder, dan lain-lain semua merupakan alat yang berfaedah.
The coexistence of the ancient and the modern may be less troubling to the Balinese because their idea of time is very different from ours. We think of time as moving in a straight line, from past to future. The Balinese see time as many repeating cycles. These cycles represent the rhythms of growth of the natural world. For instance, a flower is on a short time cycle. A rock is on a much longer cycle, while human beings are somewhere in between. Time cycles are repeated endlessly, so the past is never really gone. Balinese calendars don't measure the passage of years, but mark the way different time cycles intersect. This is one of the simplest Balinese calendars, containing only 2 cycles as well as the gods and demons that affect them. Each day has a special quality, depending on where it falls. The only example we have in our calendar of intersecting cycles is when Friday falls on the 13th day of the month. Along the top are the gods. At the bottom, demons. Reading down, the days of the 5-day cycle. Reading across, a 7-day cycle. This is the day of Dapat, the free-floating head. The goddess Durga has power over this day, as well as the buffalo-headed demon. This is a 35-day calendar. There are hundreds of others. Some calendars keep track of cycles of 10,000 years. Temples, like the calendars, help to keep track of cycles. Most of the time, each temple is empty until the day when it begins a new cycle by holding a festival. It is these festivals that control the flow of life in the village.
Balinese believe that every 420 days, the gods of the village, who are actually ancestors who've gone on to heaven, return to the village for a period of 3 days in order to be worshipped by the people. The gods come down and fly into these shrines one by one. The living villagers then come to the temple only on that day in order to worship their ancestors. This incense is a stairway to the sky by which the gods descend. The holy water, this is ordinary water taken from a sacred spring. For an instant, the priest becomes Shiva, actually becomes the god, and turns this ordinary water into the waters of life. The gods come to be worshipped with music, poetry, and with offerings like these, flower offerings, the arts of Bali. But the demons come hoping to be satiated with blood sacrifices. This is the gate to the inner sanctum of the temple, protected by a spirit or a demon wall. The gods and the worshippers pass freely through that door. But demons only travel in straight lines. So if the demon tries to come through here, he bangs his head against that wall and is frustrated. But the gods and the worshippers pass freely around the side and into the inner sanctum.
Most villages have dozens of temples, so preparations for temple festivals seem to be going on all the time in some corner of the village. For 3 days, each temple becomes an outdoor theater. It's in these performances that the ancient myths are acted out and truly become real, gaining the power to shape people's lives. The cycles of time draw the 3 worlds together, and art brings them to life. In a temple festival, it's possible to pass through into the other worlds. a classical drama at least 900 years old. Here a demon prince searches for his enemies. Every muscle is perfectly controlled, even the dancer's eyes. These festivals are the heart of village life. For at least the last 800 years, the people of the village have been gathering in this temple, and here they meet their ancestors, their gods, their demons, all the forces that create the total village. Here, clowns interpret the classical Gambu performance. They are a purely Balinese invention, master linguists translating the ancient stories and making them come alive for the people. A village girl, Made, becomes a Gambu princess, forced to marry against her will. In the poem Sumana Santaka, it is said that when a woman wishes to die, she asks the gods to return her beauty to that of the month of Kartika, the loveliness of her hair to the rain-bearing clouds, and her tears to the dewdrops suspended from the tip of a blade of grass. Dance closest to the shrines of the ancestors. Death for the Balinese is only a moment in an endless cycle of rebirths that will bring them back to the village. At the climax of the festival, everyone and everything is blessed with holy water. The Balinese call their religion Agama Tirtha, holy water religion. For them, water is the source of life, and water comes from the underworld. In a crater lake at the center of the island, the temple Ulundanao marks the spot where the waters of the underworld emerge into the middle world. Far below this crater lake, two great snakes lie coiled in a dark ocean. It is the thrashing of their bodies that forces the waters of life up into the lake. This master temple, where the waters emerge, stands at the summit of a network of temples that organize the flow of water to the rice terraces of Bali. along the irrigation canals, there are temples like Ulunda now. Each one is responsible for the fields around it. In tropical Bali, there are no seasons. Temples mark the flow of time. Every temple has its own cycle of festivals, and it is these festivals that tell the farmer when to plant and harvest and when the fields must be flooded. Using this ancient and intricate system, there are fields in Bali that have been producing 2 crops of rice a year for centuries. The temples make this system work because they do something unique. With their carefully worked out schedule of festivals, they stagger the use of Bali's limited water supply. This process begins when a master water temple holds a major festival. On the same day, the farmers from designated local water temples begin to irrigate and plant their fields. Sometime later, other assigned temples begin their planting cycles, while the previously flooded fields are drained for harvesting. On and on, the opening and closing of irrigation canals is repeated until every rice field in the master temple's area has been flooded. While some fields are wet, others are dry, and the available water is used evenly throughout the year.
Terus kalau mengukur kedalaman air, maksudnya supaya tingginya air itu sama, supaya jangan banyak ke sini atau banyak ke sana, harus diukur dengan tangan atau pakai kayu. Kemudian setelah pas, misalnya pakai tangan sekian itu, pindahkan. Kemudian harus bawa juga ke barat, bawa ke sini. Nah, sehingga ini, pas. Nah, sehingga jumlahnya, tingginya air yang ke sini dengan ke sini sama, gitu. Sama, ya. Juga lebarnya ini antara ini harus ada perbandingannya. Ya, perbandingannya.
Dan ini tidak boleh permanen katanya.
Dan ini tidak boleh permanen. Apa sebabnya tidak boleh permanen? Kalau dipermanenkan, sewaktu-waktu ada hujan, airnya banjir, bisa naik ke sawah orang airnya, sehingga tanaman akan rugi. Kalau sudah tidak permanen, terus yang punya sawah sekeliling ini asal sudah hujan, dia sudah ke sawah, buka ini, air jatuh dan tidak akan naik. Nah, itulah ini makanya tidak dipermanenkan.
During part of its growing cycle, the rice field must become a still pond so that a blue-green algae can form. The algae has invisible powers, drawing nitrogen directly from the air and fertilizing the rice without depleting the nutrients in the soil. Later, ducks eat the fish and insects that attack the young rice and fertilize the mud with their droppings. Ducks and algae are just 2 factors that have been used by the Balinese farmers to keep their fields in ecological balance for centuries. A few years ago, foreign experts persuaded many farmers to give up the temple system of organizing agriculture. They argued that the ritual calendar was irrational, so everyone planted rice as fast and as often as possible and ignored the temple calendar.
Kira-kira mereka ini kalau tidak salah ya, setelah hamanya menyerang ini tahun musim tanam 73, 74 itulah, sehingga dibebaskan daripada pembayaran pajak. Waktu itu tidak semuanya panen. Ada apa? Ada tikus mencari ini. Dan itu mengadakan musyawarah terus kembali. Nah, apa sebabnya kita rugi terus begini? Mula-mulanya memang hasil baik kan, nanam padi, ya cepet dia nanam tuh padi terus. Kemudian ada hama, kekurangan air. Nah, timbul landas begini dengan kawan lain. Nah, kenapa kita meninggalkan warisnya yang sudah baik? Gitu. Karena dengan adanya rabuk dan lain sebagainya, nah, dirapat terus kembali dengan musim tanam yang sekarang yang bersamaan begini.
Three days before the harvesting begins, a special rite is held in the fields to warn the rice that its time of sacrifice is near. And when its time has come, the rice is harvested with a blade designed to be concealed in the palm of the hand, so the transition from life to death is not shocking. The rice goddess, Dewi Shri, controls cycles of growth, while demons bring death and decay. The struggles between gods and demons are usually invisible, but can be made to appear through wayang, the art of shadow puppetry. In Balinese, wayang means reflection. With 200 puppets and 5 languages to draw on, wayang can begin to reflect the full complexity of the Balinese world. Wayang is the most ancient Balinese art and still the most popular. It is their theater, television, newsstand, and schoolroom. The Balinese believe that in the middle world we cannot perceive reality directly. Our world is the world of illusion. But on the wayang screen, the shadows of the true realities that lie beyond our senses can appear. Wayang is a window into the other worlds. Wayanwija, a puppeteer, ritually cleanses himself to become a clear channel between the gods and his community. He asks that the gods descend into his performance as though it were a temple. The divine power lives in everything, even the letters of a poem or the words of a puppeteer. In his hand is the Kayam, tree of life, which draws the energies of the 3 worlds together so the puppeteer can use them for the good of the community. Badung is Wija's sister. They belong to a family of puppeteers. A few weeks before this lesson, Badung's husband, Madra, was killed in a motorcycle accident on his way home from a performance. Madra was the greatest puppeteer in all Bali. Now Badung has begun to study wayang, something only 2 other women have ever done.
Untuk melanjutkan karirnya dia.
Masih ada wayang.
Masih ada wayang. Dan juga untuk membiayai anak-anak nanti kalau sudah bisa. Nggak ada apa-apa lagi.
Nantinya ini yang jadi dalang top.
Dia masih kecil nanti. Kalau sudah dia tua dia mau belajar juga.
Tapi bakatnya sudah begini.
Dia sudah bisa menari-narikan gitu wayang. Tapi suaranya dia belum tahu.
Karena masih kecil.
Belum tahu membaca.
Kasar itu sudah.
Tapi katanya banyak sudah mau memesan untuk nanti waktu sudah siap. Ya.
Dia baru orang sudah bilang-bilang bahwa saya sudah main. Aduh, belum belajar, saya baru mencucikan diri aja. Orang bilang sudah, kan baru belum 1 bulan dia meninggal. Kan pikiran masih kacau tuh, orang sudah bilang saya main. Aduh.
Yang Saraswati. Nah.
Yang Saraswati menjelah. Aduh. Wang sanak bersama hendak
Adawi sekanan ikanang susah serumau tamu.
Sekanan ikanang susah serumau tamu.
Lawan uang lanang ukukakan ikanang tapu berat.
Lawan uang angu ikanang tapu wana berat. Ada secara Bali itu ditanya itu di dukun. Dukunnya yang bersujud
untuk meminta sesuatu
keterangan bagaimana apa sebabnya dia meninggal gitu.
Itu dukun bilang begitu.
Ya, dukun bilang bahwa dia dipanggil sama Tuhan untuk
sebab juga ada kaitannya karya kada samudra.
Ekadasa Rudra is the supreme temple ceremony about to begin at Bali's great master temple of Besaki. Here, for an instant, all of the invisible worlds will be joined while the forces of growth and decay struggle for possession of the middle world. Ekadasa Rudra can happen only once in 100 years. No one alive has ever seen this ceremony. It is created from a few fragments of ancient poetry in the Lontars, which state that even civilizations have cycles of growth and decay, which must be kept under control. Ekadasa Rudra is a ceremony of intense pride, but even more of defiance. It's a way for the Balinese to say to the world, we will not let the forces of change overwhelm us. We will not let our civilization die. This series of ceremonies is considered extremely dangerous. It will culminate on the 10th day at the moment the century turns, when the high priests will try to transform Rudra, the most powerful demon of destruction, into Shiva, the supreme god. If this ceremony is not a success, it is believed that the forces of decay will go out of control and the middle world, our world, will come to an end.
Oke. Standby semua. Tahan. Silakan, Mang.
Para penonton sami pilih hajar saudara-saudara sedarma.
Iring tidiang para penonton sami malih ngemimitin mau sang ini karya Ekadasa Rudra Drwene magnanya dayang sehanan pesalin ring buanale pinjan ring buan agung tan maren makte bio para makte perubahan saking alit dados nagdur wenten perubahan saking sekolah menengah dados mahasiswa wenten perubahan perasaan nah ini kawanan laris mangna ajak mangna sampunang labil durah mangkene kewendanang laris taur angin pemari sudah kadidukut aking saka gunung ageng liya kinananan dening ageni saku kunang upami keni raris anduk api wantah kadi keletikan ke kunang-kunange alit nyane jantanipun basmi.
In 500 villages, preparations begin for the Ekadasa Rudra ceremonies. In the village of Sukawati, after days of collecting all the ingredients, people are finally starting to create the offerings, which will entice the demons to the ceremony. The offerings for the demons are extraordinary. They managed to make something beautiful out of things like pig fat. Now everything is ready for the journey, except for the truck to get them to Besaki, which seems to be lost.
Sing dinigi ada kekungkung na malah minas kungkung.
Kungkung dulu ya.
Ini kengkeng ya. Tuh ini terus.
Nyamping nak malu nyamping di malu ngoyong motor nak aku bantang.
Most outsiders never see the most beautiful Balinese arts. They glitter in the sunshine for a few hours, and then they're dismantled and burned. What is important for the Balinese is not how long something lasts, but how close to perfection it comes. And perfection never lasts. Now it remains only to convince one of the less willing offerings to join in the festive spirits. Besaki Temple on the slopes of the volcano Gunung Agung. 5 days until Ekadasa Rudra and the beginning of a new century. In Bali, demons are more than a simple superstition. The word for demon in Balinese comes from the Sanskrit word for element. Ekadasa Rudra symbolically dissolves nature back into its raw elements so the gods can recombine them into higher forms, just as beautiful offerings are made from crude ingredients. The demon offerings from Sukawati have a very special destination and a mountain shrine high above the main temple. This is where the demonic Rudras first descend, so the Sukawati offerings will be the first ones that the demons taste. But not all of the preparations for Ekadasa Rudra happen at the mountain temples. This morning begins the Melalasti, the joining of the three worlds. From every village temple in Bali, processions stream for miles down to the sea, carrying the gods in mock chariots. By noon, they reach the sea to await the arrival of the demons. thousands of offerings are laid out and high priests summon the demons from beneath the seas. The demons swim up from the black depths towards the beach to feast on the offerings and to savor the delicious impurities. At the critical moment when the ceremony ends, a great wave comes and washes everything clean. It's taken as a sign that the demons are not displeased. A good sign for Ekadasarudra. Bisaki Temple. It is now one day until Ekadasarudra. The offerings stream in from all over Bali. To satisfy the gods, most are renewed twice a day. Today is Mipapada, the day for animal sacrifice. One representative of virtually every Balinese animal will be offered. Some, such as the jungle quail, are rarely seen by the Balinese. There's even an eagle, which came on its own to the ceremony. With colored ribbons, high priests send the animals to the shrines of the demons at the 5 cardinal points of the compass. Here, priest of the south allows the incense to help induce a trance in which he will first lightly brush the animals with his sword, setting their souls free before their blood is actually spilled by other priests. Symbolically, their deaths dissolve the elements of nature so Shiva can recombine them into a more perfect order.
Ini adalah suatu kesempatan mereka entah bagaimana barangkali jasanya dulu, makanya mereka itu nanti sekarang jadi pakai upacara. Karena jasa, pada karma mereka itu disupat untuk kembali kepada unsur-unsur dulu. Itu maksudnya.
The Balinese believe in reincarnation and that death, whether their own or another's, should hold no fear. The welcoming dance of the ancient warriors greets Indonesia's President Suharto and a host of dignitaries. The presidential party was asked not to arrive by helicopter, for fear its passage would annoy the descending Rudras. Suharto's arrival awakens dark memories of another Indonesian president and a disastrous attempt to interfere with the timing of Ekadasa Rudra. In 1963, Indonesia was in turmoil. With the economy in ruins, President Sukarno faced a major political threat. The communists, the military, and the other political parties were scrambling for power. In an attempt to restore the people's confidence in his regime, Sukarno compelled the Balinese priests to begin preparations for Ekadasa Rudra, even though it was not the proper time. So, over the objections of the Balinese priests, preparations began. Besaki Temple is located halfway up a great active volcano, Gunung Agung. When the priests went to the mouth of the volcano for holy water, they found only smoke and ash, and Agung began to rumble. Ida Padandagriya Sitaman was then the highest religious authority in Bali. It was his responsibility to try to carry out the Ekadasa Rudra at the wrong time.
Dulu di lereng ya, di lereng di atas kan itu ada desa di sana. Desa itu ada orang-orang di sana. Sudah dikasih nasihat oleh makhluk halus supaya pergi dulu di sana. Sebab ini dari puncak akan ada lahar turun. Nanti kalau kamu di sini, nanti kamu dapat bahaya. Itu dikasih nasihat. Dia tidak mau. Sudah 2 kali makhluk halus itu datang. Juga dia tidak mau, akhirnya dia benar tuh. Hancur itu. 300 orang ada terbakar. Jadi abu itu semua. Verkul.
By March 17, 1963, great rivers of lava were pouring down the slopes of Agung in its first eruption in recorded history. Smoke and volcanic ash blotted out the sun over most of Bali. When the lava reached the plains, entire villages were wiped out. 100,000 refugees were driven from their homes, and many died of asphyxiation, burns, and later starvation.
Ini jawatan gunung api, insinyur geologi membilang, ini pura ini harus sudah hancur. Apa sebab? Sebab letaknya 7 kilo dari vulkan itu. Sebab ukuran gunung api 10 kilo dari kepunan mesti sudah hancur. Nyatanya Pura Besakih tidak apa-apa.
Today, at high noon, the 11 Rudras will descend into the ceremonial enclosure in front of the temple. It is to these platforms, at the noontime turning of the 100th cycle of the 9th dark moon, that the Rudras will descend and hopefully be transformed. At each of the 11 shrines, the high priests prepare for the demons' assembly. Gusti Negara Bagus is a Balinese anthropologist, explaining to his students the meaning of an event that will happen only once in their lifetimes.
Dalam dimensi waktu 100 tahun, kan ada pembunuhan, peperangan itu. Nah, akan disucikan lagi alam semesta ini. Disucikan kembali dengan memberikan korban kepada aspek dari Tuhan atau Siwa itu yang berbentuk Rudra 11 itu, Ekadasa Rudra. Nah sudah selesai pemberian caruan nanti itu ada sistemnya itu caru. Atau bertransformasilah siwa itu, Rudra itu salah tadi, Rudra 11 itu menjadi siwa. Nah waktu itu beliau Tuhan, lalu bisa disembah. Waktu itu baru kita muspah semuanya gitu. Kalau dalam bentuk ini nggak bisa kita menyembah karena kalau masih buta.
A messenger from Shiva appears in a wayang performance of Ekadasa Rudra.
Oh, dewa penawa sedaya periat dew. Yaya teki yang suara yukinian. Melatkara lampat aparangu. Merarian kita, anjaya kita mampang selekas silang yang adikala. Periat dew.
The moment approaches when the priests must face the Rudras, the most powerful demons of all. Each priest must concentrate all of his powers into tiny gestures. Tempted by the offerings, one by one the demons descend. And now is the time of the greatest danger. The two supreme demons, Kala and Rudra, must be faced. 30 priests and 500,000 Balinese focus their minds and wills on bringing them under control. In a few moments, a new century will begin. Noon. Ekadasa Rudra is complete. Today, the poetry of the Lontars still had power to draw an entire society together. It will be years before any priest will dare say whether the ceremony was a success. Yet each person has confronted the forces of decay and destruction to restore the balance of the middle world. The Balinese asked us to explain that they do not do this ceremony only for themselves or for the Hindu peoples of the world, but for us all.
I'm Rick Daly, science editor of Horizon. Join us for Notes of a Biology Watcher, a film with Lewis Thomas on Nova, Sunday evening at 8 o'clock.
Major funding for Odyssey was provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional funding was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Polaroid Corporation.
Channel 8's transmission costs for Odyssey are paid for by a grant from Sperry Flight Systems.